Well, hello everyone. I find myself in a rare situation where I've got time, I've got space, so I decided just to do a live video. Uh, I've done a couple of these in the past, and they really have been just impromptu. This one I've actually thought a little bit about. I haven't been live, and I don't even know if anybody's going to show up or not. I actually do have some of my things I want to talk about, but if no one shows up, fine. I'll just put it on my YouTube page, and you can bore yourself watching it later. I'm doing well. I haven't been creating as much content as I would like. I've just been really busy with work, especially in life. Seems like a recurring theme. But I have been reading, I have been busy in some ways. I've been contributing articles for the magazines that are published by Colin Blanchard and Alice Eklund, Canon, and Die With Your Mask On. Very flattered that they asked me to contribute, and I'm glad to contribute something that I think that I'm somewhat knowledgeable about. And uh, this is more of a catch up, just to say hi and see what I've been doing, what I've been reading. And I know that this is going to be one of those things where it's reverse video. So when I hold up a book and it's reversed, sorry, can't do anything about all that. But um, let's go on, shall we? Currently, what I'm reading this book. It's called American Comics: A History. This is by Jeremy Daubert. This was published in 2022. This is a book that was recommended by a friend of mine, and I put it on my mentioned on my Instagram page. It's a really fascinating, in-depth look at the history of American comics, and this starts. I mean, in the introduction, it talks about the genesis of comics from the 1500s and 1600s, but really starts talking about American comics being basically born in the mid 1800s during the Civil War. Uh, Back then, you didn't have photography, you didn't have video. Um, Only in the maybe second half of the 1800s, you had actual printing presses that could print newspapers nationwide. So cartoonists and uh, cartoonists especially were very sought after. They were paid very well, and they were basically the photography and the video. And not only did they capture what was going on, a lot of times they shaped the national thinking what was going on. And so um, the um, it's pretty interesting of a time now because so many cartoonists struggle to make a living. But back then, it was really respected. Well, depending on the New York, the type of magazine, excuse me, kind of newspaper that you work for, but it was considered a respected profession and a very lucrative one. Um, and I already got a Message Health review, so I'm pretty sure somebody's already saying silly stuff. Maybe not. And um, it's pretty interesting book. So right now I'm in the beginning of this book, and we're talking about we're right in the early 1900s, the creation of certain comics like Mutt and Jeff and other things, and how they came up. And it's really quite fascinating um, how a lot of these comics started off, and it was all through the newspapers. And newspapers now, for anybody that's um, younger than Gen X, is really like something that you've heard about, but you never uh, really read. But for Gen X and older, this was the really almost the main way you got paper. I mean, you got news, excuse me, before you started having cable and CNN and then all the other channels doing 24/7 and now social media. So if you're really interested in learning about the history of American comics, so far I can highly recommend this book. I got this at the library. It's a great read. It's written, it's not, it's factual, there's a lot of information, but it's not dry, which is a hard thing to do when you're talking about the past, but it's comics. So you start hearing, oh, well, this comic became this comic, and this guy started off doing this, and then it became this. And these are comics of a bygone era, but they had runs of 25, 30, 50 years. Uh, which is amazing because back in the day, and I'm going to sound like an old man, my favorite part of the newspaper was the comics. And, uh, and then on the Sunday paper, you'd have the big broadsheet with all the yellow pages. If you've ever read Chris Ware's, um, I forget the name of that book that comes with in the box set. There's newspapers that look like Sunday. Um, they look like the Sunday newspapers, and that's how they read. And when you were a little kid, those things looked immense. But if you look at them now, they're still pretty cool as a way to interact with comics. So if you want to get a history lesson, but an interesting one, and you want to learn about comics, I can not more highly recommend this book. Recently, I'm going to do a video about this book. This is Audrey Hepburn, a biography. I reviewed an earlier version that was published by NBM. This was published by Abrams Comic Crafts, and this is an English translation of a French graphic novel. And it's interesting because the one I read earlier was a translation of an Italian graphic novel, and they just look at the same subject different ways. There's some information in the Italian one that you don't see in this one, but there's a lot more in depth of Audrey Hepburn's life. And Audrey Hepburn is somebody else that if you're younger than Gen X, you're not going to know who she was, maybe even Boomer. But in the 50s and 60s, she was a fashion icon. She was in Breakfast at Tiffany's and Sabrina, and so many other films. And because she had given Shea doing her wardrobe, she was a fashion icon. She wore stuff, and that's what everybody wanted to wear. She had a certain appeal and allure. And what I liked about this book, and just to make it short, is that instead of saying, this happened to me, this happened to her, blah, 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 it is more like a really good multi-part, like a 8 or 10 episode mini-series you'd see like on Apple TV or Netflix, where it talks about a lot of the I would say things and events and her family that kind of impacted her life. So there's a lot of her, what she goes through, but it's almost like you're looking at it like a story, which is actually a pretty cool way of doing the biography. It isn't really first person, it's more like you're observing her life and her events. And I think the Italian one got into some more personal information, but this one definitely does. How her mom was basically a fan of Adolf Hitler, and she thought it was better to take her child from a boarding school in Kent back to the Netherlands, because her attitude was like, well, Adolf Hitler is not gonna invade Netherlands, and if he does, well, we're Aryan, so he's not gonna do anything to us, which is very familiar in 2025, because Hitler did invade the Netherlands, and they had very difficult times. And she had, there was like the winter of 1944-45. They were just basically drinking water to fill themselves up because there was no food around. It's really interesting how these events kind of shaped her life, and then you see her life. Again, if it's someone that you're not interested in, fine. But if it is, then cool. So that's what I've been reading a lot. Mostly on my social media lately, especially where I do most of my social media is Instagram. I've been posting a lot of things from TikTok and other social media about comics. People have some really interesting insight on comics, and not only comics, but art. Because comics is a small piece of art. I know that in America, we don't take comics as serious as they do, let's say, in France, where it's considered a bona fide art form, and it's given that respect. But I've been publishing more of those things just to kind of, at least from my page, anybody sees what I have, whether or not you see it or not. It's more of a way of, how can I say it? Maybe just opening eyes, because I think a lot of people that read comics, all they do is read comics. Like, they're not really into watching film, they're not really into seeing fine art, going to museums, reading other books and not other genres. And sometimes they're just so locked in one genre of comics like superheroes or manga that they don't even read other stuff. And I think you have to see other things and see other um, mediums. Like comics is my favorite medium, but you have to see other things. And I think it opens your mind to the possibilities. And I think a lot of times you'll see TV shows and you'll see movies and then you'll read a comic and you're like, oh, that's where they got the idea from. Or sometimes I've actually seen it like Game of Thrones. I've seen a few things where like, oh, that's where Jason Aaron got the idea for Doctor Strange having to pay a price for his magic. Things like that. I think that it's beneficial for people to expand their horizons a bit. And just for me, if I find something interesting, I share it. And it's a quick way of doing it. Having said that, I've taken like a week sabbatical from TikTok. The thing about TikTok is, and there are some good creators that post really interesting stuff about art and comics in TikTok. The problem is that when you're on that FYP, um, it's like it's like looking for mushrooms. Mushrooms grow in manure. And so to find the mushrooms, you got to go through a lot of manure. And that's really what TikTok is. Now, if all you care about is the latest fashions or you're caring about what's trending, that sort of thing, then I don't know if you have that same experience. But for me, I use a lot to get different viewpoints of world events. And so it seems like, oh, you feel this way about a certain world event. Hey, we're going to start throwing trolls and false media and all this other stuff that kind of debunk all that stuff. So there's a lot of negativity and just a lot of crap on there, to just be frank with you. It's really it's just it gets tiring after a while, and I think it's good to step away from that. This is kind of like why I like Instagram and I like YouTube, because YouTube is similar in that way. But back in the day with social media, especially with Twitter pre Elon Musk, which I'm no longer part of Twitter, but back then, over time, you could really get the algorithms to give you the stuff that you wanted and not the stuff that you didn't want. But now it just seems like if you feel bad about starvation in Gaza, all of a sudden you're going to get a video saying that there is no starvation in Gaza and it's all a lie. Things like that, just to, I don't know what the reason is. I guess just to get you angry and engaged. I think that's the reason. But really, there's just so much crap that I just need to take a break. But there are some good content creators for comics there. So I think over time, I've been able to follow those people, rely less on the FYP. But the FYP once in a while will throw somebody that posts content that's good content about art, comics, film, writing, because all those things are needed to make comics. I think like you can tell. I'm gonna sound mean, but I used to be part of a Facebook group years ago called the Cartoon Kayfabe is Ringside Seats, and you could tell that a lot of the people that were trying to make comics that all they ever did was read comics, and they grew up reading, I don't know, Tom McFarlane, so all their art looks like bad Tom McFarlane. I don't even know if they studied art. Maybe they did, but it seems like they didn't study anything else. And you kind of have to study all these different things: music, film, fine art, sculpture, these kinds of things that all kind of inform your brain, so you can kind of appreciate things that you appreciate there and translate when you read comics as far as what you like. That's just my opinion. I've been reading comics. I'm going to date myself. I've been reading comics since June of 1974 when I picked up Fantastic Four 147, and no longer really read superhero comics. I read independents and manga, but there's still a lot of things that I learned from reading superhero comics when I read comics now. So yeah, sometimes on my Instagram I can be opinionated. I don't try to be mean, but I can be opinionated. I don't know everything. I can be wrong, but at the same time I've read a lot. So I think I have a slightly informed opinion. Let's just say that. But that's really why I've been using my Instagram for. This is, again, this is more just chatting about comics. I see people that do shows like this every week, and they have a certain time, and they have everything, and they have a whole setup, and it's really cool. I've seen a lot of people that do videos, and they have the really slick intro, and they're talking about, oh, the greatest comic you've never read, Love and Rockets, where, like, it's like the 5,000th video of Love and Rockets. I'm not knocking Love and Rockets. I'm halfway through reading the first volume, because I never read in the 80s and 90s, and it's fascinating. But there's a lot of stuff that's like trying to be like cartoonist kayfabe. Um, maybe not as cringy sometimes, but they're still trying to like get clicks and like say, oh, you gotta read this and you gotta read that. Or they come out and like, these are the 5 best comics you need to read. And it's like, fine, that's not my deal. I'm not like some 25-year-old YouTuber trying to like do the clickbait thing. And also, but I will say that when you see a lot of these videos, there's a lot of things that you think is, hey, that's a kind of cool idea. Maybe I'll incorporate that. And sometimes you see some stuff and you're like, okay, I'm never gonna do that. So again, that's why I'm here. Today I went to the library, I picked up some books. First, I picked up by, and I'm gonna get her name wrong, okay, Paige Hender, The Confessional. Now, this was published by Silver Sprocket and came out this year. And the reason why I picked this up is that I'm going to SPX this year in September 2025. I'm really excited about that. So when I was looking at the special guest, she popped up. And the premise of the book is really fascinating. This is some of the art for it. But the premise of the book is that there's a vampire and she feels guilty being a vampire. So she goes to a priest and confesses, and the priest starts, saying, well, I think you can feed, but we have to go after the people who've confessed to me, who I know are really bad people and they probably deserve to die. And so that starts off, but it seems like it's like a Faustian deal. And later on, there's probably like maybe the priest isn't doing these things for the reasons that he's saying he's doing. But the premise seemed cool, and so I'm really looking forward to reading this. And if I like this, I'll buy it and I'll have her sign it. Another book I picked up, Lunar New Year Love Story. I'm sorry, and I'm gonna get it by Jean Luen Yang and Luen Pham. Now, the reason I picked this up was that this won 3 Eisners. And this was not on my radar at all. And I think the reason why it's on my radar is because it's considered a young adult book. But when I saw it won 3 Eisners, I'm like, well, maybe it was a hot book and maybe they just gave it a bunch of Eisners. Because, the Eisners, sometimes they get it right, a lot of times they get it wrong. But I thought, let me read this. And I got this in the library, as I said. And maybe I like it. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe I don't think it deserved those awards, for my opinion. But what I will say is that you kind of have to open your mind. This is not something that I would normally read, but maybe it's really good, or maybe it's not. But at least I can read it and make my own decision, or have my own thoughts about it. But you kind of have to be open-minded. I think when it comes to reading comics, a lot of, especially as we get older, like myself, we stay locked into reading certain creators, certain types of genres within comics. That's all we want to read. We don't want to read anything else, and that's it. But I think you have to keep your mind open and explore new things. It's like music. Back in the day when, I know vinyl's come back, but back in the day when there was only vinyl and cassettes, you would go to the record shop, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records, maybe thousands. And it was good to find something new, because you could find new type of music or new band. And hey, if you like this band, you may like this band also. But also the new stuff keeps the old stuff fresh. Like if all you read is 1980s '80s Marvel comics, for me that get old. But if I read newer stuff and then I go back once in a while and I read something from the '80s or whatever era, it's like I look at it now, and I'm not a nostalgia fan. So if I liked it as a kid and I look at it now and I think it's trash, I'm gonna say, "Oh man, this was trash." You know, like what was I? You know, like this is terrible. But sometimes you'll find that you read that stuff from the old days and you're like, "Oh, this is actually pretty good." You know, it still reads well. Um, but I think it's really important for people to kind of just keep reading new stuff, and just staying on where it's out there. And I think you have to be open minded. There's a bit of snobbery in comics, especially small independent press. Um, and I'll be honest, as a person who doesn't read superhero comics anymore, in America, the superhero comic industry has to be healthy. Superhero comics have to sell to keep comic book stores in business. That's the way it is. That's the way it probably will always be. It's not Paris, France, or Belgium, or Italy, or just Europe, where they come out with those nice BDs, those nice little hardcover books that are drawn really well, and they're just really great stories. Um, Here you need superheroes. So even if I don't read them, I acknowledge their importance in the American marketplace. That's why when you see a lot of different reports from different stores saying that after Superman came out in the theaters, a lot of people have come into the stores to start reading Superman. I mean, they've done what basically no other superhero film has ever done. They've actually got people in the shops, because none of these movies have ever generated any sales, any noticeable sales, maybe some negligible sales in comics. This is the first time that people are actually looking and say, hey, let me check out Superman again. Let me check out what some cool stories are. And there's a lot of them because it's funny. Superman is something that I think, I don't know if it was cartoonist kayfabe or not, but I remember seeing some talking about how, or reading something somewhere that said that for some reason, some of the best Superman stories are made by some of the best writers in comics, like guys like Alan Moore, uh, Grant Morrison, and so on and so forth. They really just love that character and know how to write them well. So there's a lot of great Superman stories as well as other comics. So I think you have to be open-minded. Now, maybe you don't want to read superheroes, but maybe you want to read manga, or maybe you want to read, maybe there's a YA book like Lunar New Year Love Story that comes out and you're like, well, that's different. Let me see if I like it or not. And I have a rule of thumb. I'll read a book 50 pages, maybe if it's a manga, maybe 100 pages, I'll read it. And if it's not my thing, I'll just stop. I used to be back in the old day, like, okay, I'm going to finish reading this thing because I started, but last year, the book, my favorite thing is Monsters Volume 2 came out. I love Volume 1 like everybody else did, and I read it and I really didn't like it. And I kept reading the book thinking that it was gonna finally come around, but it ended really flat. Kind of the ending was like, bleh. So I've learned now that if I'm 50, 60 pages in a comic, 70 pages in a comic, and I'm not really feeling it, I just stop because there's so many other good comics that I have on my to read pile that I want to read. There's so many good comics being published every day. So why waste time reading something that you're not into? And I think a lot of times people who read comics, especially monthly comics, they just keep reading the same old stuff. It's more out of habit. Like you have guys that, oh, have every issue of Spider-Man from issue 200 or something. And they sometimes say, yeah, I don't even read the story, I just look at the art. And that's it. But I think it's just a waste of time. And as someone who's older, I don't have that, I don't have 30, 40 years to read comics. So whatever time I have left, I want to spend it on good stuff. So I don't know if this is good. I know I want a bunch of Eisners, but I'm going to read it. It's a nice looking book. Thirdly, today at the library, I picked up The Human Target Volume 1 by Tom King and Greg Smallwood. Now, if you've ever seen any of my Instagram posts, you'll know that I'm not the biggest Tom King fan. I think when he started out, with the Vision and the Omega Men, which was very good. I think he had a lot of cool ideas and was interesting. But I think it just seemed like after his very fast success, that he just kind of sort of settled into a pattern, and his comics just became very predictable and really didn't seem very interesting. I remember what turned me off of Tom King was Miracle Man. Now I know Mr. Miracle, excuse me, not Miracle Man. I apologize. I know a lot of people will sit there, oh, Mr. Miracle, that was like one of the greatest graphic novels I've ever read. Oh, that's great. Uh, in my opinion, it's not. I remember reading issue 12, seeing how everything was going to end, and I saw how it ended, and I remember grabbing the thing, looking up, and just yelling, "Is that it?" You know, I think Tom King tried to be Alan Moore and threw up a lot of balls in the air and only caught a few of them, and we don't know what happened to the other balls. And that's kind of to me like an easy way out. It's like I'm gonna use a pro wrestling um, allegory here. It's when you say, "Hey, we're gonna have this match, and it's gonna be a street fight, no DQ, no nothing. You know, one person has to be pinned." So basically, it's an easy match because these guys can just start off in the ring. They can brawl all over the stadium. They can jump off of stuff. They can break stuff over people's head. They can, you know, land on people through tables. They can just do whatever the hell they want because there's no rules to stay in. And that's what it seemed like when you have these open endings where there's not enough resolution. It just seems like an easy way out. Like, I had a lot of cool ideas, but I really don't know how to wrap them up. So just leave it open ended and leave it up to the reader. And I think in a lot of cases, it's just, for me, lazy writing. I remember after that, I was like, I'm not going to read that guy anymore. But what DC does for Tom King, and I think Dark Horse does the same now, is that they pair him up with really good artists. And so the books sell, but the books sell more for the art than the writer. But somehow the writer always gets most of the praise for the book. So I've wanted to read this. This came out like 3 years ago. I've been wanting to read this for a while, only because I'm a huge fan of Greg Smallwood. But I really don't think that this story is going to be that great. So I'm actually going to read my first Tom King book in about 7 years. And I don't expect much. I expect the Greg Smallwood art. I mean, if you're looking at it now, Greg Smallwood, he is a great artist. Huge, huge fan of his. Just, if you've ever seen the run that he and Jeff Lemire did for Moon Knight, maybe 8, 9 years ago, that was a great run. Greg Smallwood really was able to bring a lot to that book. And the writing by Jeff Lemire was very good as well. So I'm going to kind of like break one of my rules about not reading Tom King books anymore because I'm a Greg Smallwood fan. And I've been actually struggling on whether or not I'm going to, you know, pick this book up. But when I saw it was in the library, I said, okay, well, you know what? It's not going to cost me anything. And if I don't like, as I said, at 40, 50 pages in, and I think it's the same nebulous Tom King thing where people stare at each other and say one word and then the reply is another word, like in Batman, they would say, bat, cat, like, you know, I can just say, forget it, it ain't that good, and I shouldn't have read it. But then again, that's the part of comics. Sometimes you'll surprise pleasantly, and sometimes you're surprised not pleasantly, and sometimes you're not surprised at all, good and bad. One other book I'm reading, let me get this, currently reading, is this, The Complete Dead Bone Erotica Collection by Image. This came out like a couple of months ago. Vombo D. I keep wanting to say Vombo Day, but I found out it's Vombo D. Vombo D was one of the, I've always heard that Vombo D was one of these seminal comic book writers from the underground era. But you don't see a lot of his work being mentioned. I mean, people talk about Robert Crumb, Spain Rodriguez, so on and so forth. But people always talk about, people never really talk about, but I've always heard, oh yeah, he was one of the major players of that underground movement from the late 60s and 70s. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a really big underground comics fan. I understand their importance to American comics, but honestly, I think a lot of them The art is good, the stories are terrible, writing is bad. But I decided to give this a shot only because I heard so much about Bodhi, and it's a beautiful book. When I finish it, I'm going to review it. But the art has been cleaned up from this. This is a collection of Dead Bone Erotica. This ran in a magazine called Cavalier, which was a men's magazine in the early 70s. And this is every strip related to that. In addition, there's some art by his son, Mark Bodie, who draws in the style of his father, Vaughn. And it's a really, I would say, interesting read so far. So far, I'm only on the black and white work, the early work, and then later on, I guess, the color. But he's got a really interesting color palette. Let me show some pages that maybe won't get blocked by the YouTube censors. But like this really interesting color palette. They did a great job with the restoration. This work is over 50 years old. Really nice physical package. And it's funny because something that I didn't know, but I started doing research, is that his art style, you see that in graffiti, and actually influenced a lot of graffiti artists, like on the subways and all that. And you can see the thick lines, the color palette. You can see that in graffiti at the time. You still see homages to that art style in graffiti today. So again, this is something that I would not normally read. I'm not a big underground comics fan. Like I said, I understand the importance of Robert Crumb. Robert Crumb's a great writer, but I think a lot of these guys. I'll make an exception for a few, like Spain Rodriguez. I thought he was a pretty good writer. I think he had an idea of what he was trying to do, and it seemed like a lot of the other creators draw amazing stuff, but like the story was just like, yeah, we'll just put some story together. The guys, people are smoking weed when they're reading this, so they're not really going to remember the story. They just want to be blown away by the art. But this is actually quite interesting. And it's an oversized hardcover, really well put together, nice, thick, glossy pages. And I know a lot of people really don't like glossy pages when it comes to comics. They want the matte paper. I think that some work looks better on glossy paper, and some it depends on the coloring and all that. But this kind of glossy paper really brings out a lot of the color, and that's the thing with gloss versus matte. From what I've seen, is that the matte is the original, I guess, especially for the coloring, is the way that was supposed to look like originally. But the glossy the blackers seem more black. The colors pop a little bit more. I don't necessarily want to see it on old newsprint, because originally it was printed on magazine paper, slick paper. So it was originally printed on some type of glossy paper. I think people make too much of like, oh, well, this matte versus glossy paper thing, I think is quite silly. But anyway, that's what I'm currently have on my plate. And what else? Like I said, I'm going to SPX. I'm going to meet up with a couple of people I've known online for a few years. I'm actually going to meet them in person. I'm excited about that. And I'm hoping SPX gets their website updated so I know the full list of exhibitors. I know who the special guests are, but full list of exhibitors, the full schedule for sightings and all that. I'm a bit of a planner. To me, when I go to cons, it's sort of like jazz. Like, what song you're gonna play, but then you got to build in some room to like freestyle and just go off somewhere and improvise. But I like to know like what I really want to see, and then say, okay, I want to really see this, and the rest of it is just whatever I see, and I'll just let it come naturally. Let me see what else. I saw Superman recently, as I said. I thought Superman was great. I think a lot of the Snyder Bros that are upset that Superman wasn't desaturated and wasn't Homelander really missed the point of Superman. They've never read the source material. I'm glad that James Gunn pivoted this way. I like the fact that he didn't talk about the origin. I'm glad that he's already established there are other metahumans in this universe. I think you cut through a lot of stuff. You get to the point faster. And also, I'm glad that not every superhero movie now by DC is Homelander. It's not dark, gritty. Um, the Hi Victor, dark, gritty, angry. Because Superman in the comics is like he's got struggles too, but he's like, I want to help the world. He's not this angry dude. And I mean, Batman is always dark, although like the Batman template has been the same Batman template for ever since 1987's Dark Knight Returns. And I think that everybody thinks that all superheroes have to be that way. And um, I think that there's a lot more that can be done. I like the fact that there was bright colors. I like the fact that um, not everybody was super heroic. I mean, Superman is obviously, but I'm glad that there are different types of superheroes. Like we got Guy Gardner's character. That's Guy Gardner's. Hawk Girl's character. That's Hawk Girl. Um, they're showing that they're all superheroes. They all believe in justice, but they also are different people, have different approaches and different levels of how gentle they'll be. But I thought Superman was excellent. People sitting there saying, well, it's not going to make as much money as Man of Steel, and it's not going to do this, and it's not going to do that. Hey, man, it's grossed over $500 million internationally. And I think in an era where so many superhero movies, especially from DC, but Marvel too, have disappointed us for so long, that these kind of movies need to regain that trust from the moviegoer who's going to spend 30 something dollars to see it in IMAX and feel like they got their money's worth as far as entertainment goes. Um, this is not like back when Man of Steel first appeared, because it was like, oh, we're finally going to see Superman. Now it's like, okay, we've seen Superman done badly. We've seen the Justice League done badly. We've seen a lot of these. We saw the last Flash film, which had Michael Keaton come back as Batman. The Aquaman movies were fine, a little bit batshit crazy, but that's the way. That was the thing. They thought that was going to work. I mean, yeah, Black Adam. That's more. The less we talk about it, better. But that was not a good film, and that was the. And in a way, I'm glad that movie came to be, because that was really the death of the old DC movie universe, and that really, I think that Dwayne Johnson's ego took a shot, because he thought he was going to come in and be the guy, and everybody realized that nobody really cares about Black Adam that much, and nobody really cares about Dwayne Johnson that much. In his mind, they do, but for comic book movie goes. So I'm glad that they've actually switched. I'm sorry that they've wasted great performances by Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate, and so many other actors that have acted really well in these films, but they needed a tonal shift, and they got it. And Mr. Terrific's character was played very well. I like that a lot. It was, and even Lex Luthor, he's a bad guy, but at least it wasn't it wasn't Batman versus Superman's Lex Luthor, where it just seemed like caricature of a villain. And I saw Fantastic Four. That Fantastic Four was great. They really got the spirit and the ethos of the entire team. I think everybody played their roles well. I think Pedro Pascal, for all the crap he gets, I think he gets a lot of crap because people like him and women are comfortable around him. And a lot of superhero guys, you guys really believe in that. Not all of you, but a lot of you believe in that male fantasy thing, power fantasy thing, where like the guy has to be the dominant one, and he has to be basically Homelander or Batman under Scott Snyder. And that's not the Fantastic Four. I think Pedro Pascal played Reed perfectly. I think it was written very well as a guy who thinks too much and sometimes is brilliant but doesn't think about the impacts of what he says or what he's thinking, that goes how that impacts his family, especially his wife. And I'm glad, and a lot of the Snyder Bros and the superhero bros and the comics bros, I think are crapping on Fantastic Four because Sue Storm was really the heart and the leader of that team. Like she was the strongest one. I mean, the one scene when, and I'm spoiler here, when they're in space being chased by the Silver Surfer, and Silver Surfer is gaining on them. In the old movie, you say, "Hey guys, she's gaining on us." You know, I mean, when they have that, Sue just says, "Oh, hey Todd, thank you." Um, a lot. Sue Storm just says, "Johnny, kill her. She's trying to kill your nephew. Kill her." I mean, she just went like, "Hey, you got to get rid of a threat," and that's a leader, but it's also a mom, and that's a mom, and any mom that cares about their kids will do anything to protect their child. They don't give a crap, and it's not. They don't even think twice about it. So, and I think a lot of guys who, I'm sorry, if you've been, I think if you, um, moment, Victor. I think if you read the comics, you'll see that Sue has had that role the last 30 years or so, 30, 40 years. And I think that a lot of guys just can't handle a powerful woman who's written really well, especially one who's not being a sex pot. You know, sort of like Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, or I know she's more covered up now, but Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch, she's a beautiful woman, don't get me wrong. And I think I'm glad that they got away from the sex appeal more from the earlier films and just started showing her more as a threat. And she's a really great actor. I just think a lot of guys can't stand the fact that Sue Storm was able to push Galactus through a portal and sacrificed her life to save her kid. Um, if you've been married and if you have kids and your wife or partner or whatever is a decent mom, they would do that. So for me, that was believable, but you actually have to like been around strong women, and you've also had to be married and understand what it's like. I think the characters were all done very well, and I like the fact that Johnny Storm is the hothead, is the good-looking guy, but he was a lot smarter in this movie than he was in the 2005 or 2005 movie, and a lot smarter than, I haven't read the comics recently, but a lot smarter than he was in the comics originally. I think that that's a good character. Ben Grimm's character was done perfectly. I think they got the ethos. And Victor, I agree with you. I think that retro look worked perfectly for them because they are the only superheroes in that universe, in that Earth. And I think that looked really cool. I think it was visually distinctive, and I think they did a great job with Galactus. I'm glad he wasn't a cloud. I'm glad he was wearing all purple with the big helmet. I think they had little subtle nods that were really well done, like when he lands on Earth and he grabs dirt and it's trees and sniffs them, because you realize he's been in a spaceship for so long that he hasn't had the chance to actually go on a planet and smell nature. Those little things aren't really important to the plot, but they actually make the character a little bit more believable. Just really smart writing and smart directing, and I'm looking forward to their next appearances. I think they got the right actors. I think they nailed the roles. Again, I think a lot of people wanted that 1960s Stanley and Jack Kirby, where Reed was, let's just face it, he was a bit of a misogynist, and he treated Sue like women should be seen and not heard, that kind of attitude. And because originally Sue's power was to turn invisible, and that was it. Then later on, she got the force fields because it had a power up. But all she could do was be a damsel in distress and be invisible. I mean, it's that old school thing of where women can't really be powerful. And I thought I think everything worked with that film. Was it a perfect film? No. But these are superhero movies. We're not talking about movies that are going to win 10 Oscars or whatever. But this was a very, very good superhero film. It was entertaining. They captured the spirit of the characters right. They got the right actors. They got the right dialogue. I think that they got a lot accomplished in this to set up Avengers Doomsday. And that, I think, is another, just like Superman, it's a pivot to a better direction. Fantastic Four is the pivot. And basically, this is the movie that is going to try to help get that franchise right. And I'm happy because I'm glad that both of these, I'm glad that DC and Marvel have both realized that they really screwed up their franchises. They made a lot of bad decisions. DC made a lot of bad decisions because they thought everything should be Zack Snyder. And Marvel made a lot of bad decisions because they got greedy. They did the same thing with Star Wars. They got greedy, they got lazy. They started making programs and movies that nobody really wanted to see, like Solo. And they just kind of like, just did it for profit, and they just made a lot of bad content. People just tuned out. A lot of TV shows shouldn't have probably been made or aired. Uh, I mean, I remember when we first saw the Vision of the Scarlet Witch, how great that was, and we thought, oh, they're all going to be this great, and we didn't really realize that that was going to be the best of the TV series. And you really didn't have to be a fan. I have a 20-year-old daughter. She doesn't read comics. She doesn't watch superhero movies. Really doesn't have any interest in it. But she told me, "Hey, I saw Scarlet. I saw the Vision of the Scarlet Witch," and I said, "How?" What she thinks? She goes, "Oh, I really liked it. It was really good. I don't know anything about the characters, but I just thought it was a really good series." So I think hopefully Marvel and Kevin Feige and all these people have realized, yeah, we got cheap with the CGI. We did some really stupid stories like Ant-Man 3. We did some dumb decisions because we just didn't care. We just figured that we just pump out crap and the fans would watch it, and the fans stopped watching it. And now they're going to go ahead and try to go, and I think it benefits us, the consumer, the moviegoer, because now these two franchises are really trying to make good films or entertaining films. And no superhero movies are ever going to be perfect. There's going to be certain things that you're going to like that someone else is not going to like. But overall, I thought it was a really great film. I thought it was really, really well done. I liked it a lot. I thought, yeah, I just thought it was really good. And again, like I said, Superman was really good too. I think they picked a really great actor for Superman. Like, who could play that Clark Kent role, but play that Superman role as well. And I also like the fact that Supergirl is different. She's younger. She likes to party. She's, maybe not as mature as Clark. I like seeing the difference at the end between Superman's relationship with Krypto, and then you realize that Krypto's really Supergirl's dog, and how she doesn't mind Krypto being this like this potential source of disaster. But I think Krypto was great, and again, also interest in dog adoptions have gone up since Superman. I think you can say what you want about the movie being good or not good. You can say, oh, well, they didn't make as much money as this, or I didn't like this, or whatever. But I think the casting was good. I think the actress who played Lois Lane was perfect for the role as well. Gave a lot of those Superman animated series Lois Lane vibes, except that she wasn't wearing little tiny mini skirts like they did in the cartoon. As 2025. I liked the fact that they're setting up a universe. I like that Mr. Terrific was not just some Kevin Hart sidekick. I like the fact that he was instrumental and powerful, and he cares about superhero, but again, he's got his own personality, ego too, especially the scene where he's like, I don't need any help. I'm the goddamn Mr. Terrific. Like he has that ego, but you have to have that ego if you're that smart. As opposed to Reed, who's super smart, but he doesn't have that ego. He's super confident in everything that he thinks is going to happen. But at the same time, he doesn't have that ego. So I like how you have these guys who are brilliant scientists, but they have their own different unique takes. I also like the interplay between Reed and Sue. I think they acted like a married couple. And I think, again, a lot of guys who've never been married, never been in a long-term relationship, don't have kids, really can't resonate with that. But if you've read the comics, it made sense. If you've lived that experience, it made sense. If your exposure to Fantastic Four has been the last, I don't know how many years, although I think the recent runs of Fantastic Four by Chris North are supposed to be pretty good. But, if you're experience with comics is limited, then um, you're not going to see too much. What else? That's really it. I haven't been buying as many comics. I've said for a while. I just don't think there's a lot of great comics out there. I don't buy monthly issues. I buy graphic novels. I really, like I said, don't really care about superheroes. I know that the monthly titles will be collected into a trade, and maybe I'll read the trade. But right now, I'm just trying to read all different stuff. And I still have like 30 books, or now with the library trip, 35 books on my to read list. And it's all different stuff. And I think that's the fun of comics. You can, if you want to eat McDonald's every day, you can eat McDonald's. But you know what? There's Chinese food, there's Italian food, there's Thai food, there's Korean food, there's soul food. There's so much that you can read, and it's all good. So that's really what I felt like saying. Um, as I said, not a lot going on, but I've been trying to just make the time for comics and make the time for content. I really do love comics. It's my favorite medium. Now, usually when you say, "Oh, it's my favorite medium, I love comics," people will sit there and roll their eyes. But you know what? Just because you like comics doesn't mean that. It is one thing that just bugs me. I think I'm speaking to people who understand this, but like, it's just because you read comics and you like comics doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that you're not aware of what's going on in the world. It doesn't mean that you don't have a career, don't have a job, don't have relationships, don't have kids. It means that's what you like. That's your favorite medium. Some people's favorite medium is movies, and they will tell you an actor's entire career by year. That's their thing. Comics is my thing. So that's really it. Don't have a lot of people coming on saying hello, which is fine because it is Saturday night. If you're young and you're young, or you're a family thing, this is probably the worst time to do a live video, but it was the best time for me. And that's really it. Don't know if I'll be doing these more often or not, but maybe I will. I Actually, I had one thought I wanted to talk about that I forgot to mention, and I just realized right now that like I cut myself shaving earlier. Uh, that's not anything bad. This is just me being clumsy. Uh, I used to think when it came to like what's better, video, podcasts, newsletters. I used to think newsletters were like a thing of the past, and very few people read them, and maybe they are, but I think that readers like reading. And I realized that podcasts, video chats like this, newsletters, review magazines, they're all good, but they're all going to appeal to different people. And I think that's good. I think the more ways you find to get the message out to people about comics is really important, because one of my biggest gripes about comics publishers is that they're mostly really terrible at marketing. They just think that if they put an Instagram post, I think so many have relied on previews to help sell their comics that they've gotten lazy, and they don't have a lot of budget for advertising. And I don't think TV commercials work either. I think advertising for comics is very difficult because of the medium it is, but I think we as readers creating all this content and publishers creating this content have to create this content, because I think we have to do the marketing, because the publishers for the most part aren't doing it, or they're not doing it well, or they just don't have the resources to do it well if they want to do it well. So I think at the end of the day, sorry, one of my cats is chasing something. Might be a fly. I think at the end of the day, what's really important is that we create content, we absorb content, we share what we have, we share our thoughts, we share maybe our opinions are full of crap, maybe they're not. but I think that it's good that we all do this. And my end point of all this is that I think certain content is easier for others. Like I contribute to the magazines by Colin Blanchard and Alice Eklund, as I mentioned. But I find it hard to write, not because I don't have a good vocabulary or I can't write. It's just, always been a long process for me. I write and then I'll fix it, then I'll fix it some more, and I'll fix it some more, and I'll fix it some more, and I'll fix it some more. And even no matter how much people say, hey, I like this, I'm never satisfied. I think going on video and shooting my mouth off and talking is a better fit for my skill set. So that's why I kind of like to do it. I wish I were like one of these young, good-looking guys like Bob Fish from Europe that look really good on the screen, and and so like they can kind of go on video, because it seems like if you're going to do video podcasts, you're gonna you got to be like there's two types of guys. You got to be like that young, skinny, good-looking person, or a lot of times it's guys with the baseball cap on and they're wearing all black. This is why whenever I go on the camera, I never wear all black. Like I was actually gonna put a collared shirt on like I usually do, but I figured, okay, it's a white t-shirt. I don't feel like changing. So, excuse me a second. Cats behave. And so I think a lot of times you kind of have to go with your strengths. Hey, Kevin. Same to you. Stay safe. Thank you for saying hi. But I think you have to find, if you're gonna like share content, do it the way that you feel most comfortable. I, for whatever reason, maybe because of my age and I don't give a crap, and I've read comics so long, I don't give a crap, I'll go on here and talk. But some people are not comfortable with that. And that's cool. They want to be behind, they want to do an article, they want to do articles. That's cool. They want to do podcasts. That's cool. But if you've ever had the interest to share what you have, even just sharing comics that you have, because the cool thing about all the collections is that we all have stuff that most people don't have. Or a lot of times we have stuff and we share it, and people are like, oh my God, I never knew this. I never knew there was this edition. Or, oh yeah, I love that comic. And I think that just helps, especially in the independent and small press world. That helps a lot. The superhero world, that's where everybody does their podcast, or their YouTube videos or their TikToks, because that's where all the money is. They figure, hey, that's what most comics sell, so we're gonna do stuff about the best 10 comics featuring Batman ever made, or some crap like that. I really don't care about that. I think I've probably read most of those best comics ever made, so like I don't really care about seeing a list about that. Anyway, I've been sitting here chatting nonstop for almost an hour, and for any of you that have actually stayed for most of the time, I salute you, and I hope that I didn't bore you too much. So anyway, you all take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay hydrated. Somebody opened the blast furnace into hell this summer with the weather. I live in Miami. It has been really hot this week, and we're not getting nearly as much rain as we normally do, and that helps cool things off. So I can only imagine other parts of the country, because at least we're built for air conditioning. But other than that, be careful, stay safe. We're living in very uncertain, and depending on your situation, maybe dangerous times. So just take care of yourselves, all right? Have a good night. Thanks.